Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's absolutely foundational to Islamic prayer, the rules of modesty. So, what does that actually mean in practice? Like, what parts of the body have to be covered for a prayer to even be considered valid? We're going to break down the specific rules for both men and women.
All right, so to really get into these rules, we've got to understand a core concept first. And this is a big one. We're not just talking about a dress code here. Covering oneself properly is, well, it's a fundamental condition that makes the prayer valid in the first place.
The key term you'll hear is satr al-awra. It basically translates to covering the awra. And listen, this is not just a suggestion or recommendation, it's what's known as a fard, an absolutely obligatory condition. If you don't do it, the prayer is pretty much considered invalid. It's that serious.
Okay, so what does this all mean in practice, right? Let's start with the requirement for men. It's actually really specific.
So for men, the aura, that's the area that must be covered for the prayer to count, it extends from just below the navel all the way down to just below the knee, a very defined space.
And you might be wondering, where does this rule actually come from? Well, the main evidence is a prophetic saying, a hadith, which spells it out very clearly. It defines the aura of a man as that specific area from below his navel until it passes his knees.
This, of course, brings up a really common question. I mean, if the area is from below the navel to below the knee, what about the knee itself? Is it considered in or out?
And we get the answer from another prophetic saying, which states pretty plainly, the knee is part of the aura. So just to be safe and make sure the condition is 100% met, the consensus is to include the knee. You could call it a spiritual precaution, just to be certain.
Okay, so that covers the rule for men. Now let's switch gears and look at the requirement for women. And as you're about to see, it's quite a bit different.
The general principle here is that for a woman, her entire body is considered aura. Now, you'll see the source text use the term free woman, and that's to distinguish the rule from the one for enslaved women in a specific historical context. But for our purposes and for today, this rule applies to all women.
So this gives us a really clear side-by-side comparison, doesn't it? For men, it's that very specific zone. For women, the default, the starting point is the entire body. But, and this is a big but, with some crucial exceptions that apply specifically during prayer.
So I just mentioned exceptions, and you're probably wondering what they are. Let's dig into that, because for women during prayer, this is where the details get really, really important.
Okay, so the sources point to two specific exceptions during the prayer itself. A woman doesn't have to cover her face or her hands, and that's defined as the area from the wrist down.
Which, of course, makes you think, why those specific parts? Why the face and hands? Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, there is. The reasoning is kind of twofold. First, it has to do with tradition. The face and hands have always been natural places for things like adornment, kohl or rings. And second, there's a really practical side to it. These are the parts that you need to have visible for just daily life, for interacting with people and doing business.
All right, but what about another part of the body that probably just popped into your head? The feet? Are they considered part of the aura during prayer, or are they an exception too?
This is a great question. According to the source material we're looking at, there have been some differences of opinion on this among scholars over the years. But the view cited as correct is that a woman's feet are not considered aura, but specifically during prayer. So what that means is she doesn't actually need to cover them for her prayer to be valid.
Okay, let's wrap this up by looking at the really foundational piece of evidence, the thing that underpins this whole broader rule for women that we've been talking about.
And here it is. This is the foundational prophetic saying that it all comes back to. It's a very direct, very clear statement. The free woman is aura to be covered, and that's what establishes the general rule of concealment we've been discussing.
So that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. We've spent this time talking about the physical details, what to cover and why. But the bigger question, the deeper one, is this. How does this physical act, this discipline, connect to our spiritual focus? How does preparing the body actually prepare the mind and the heart for that conversation with God? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.